Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we all have other things to do. So let me just give you my thoughts about the information discovered by Senator Grassley. I have known President Biden probably for 25 years. I like him. I respect him. I disagree with him more times than not. But if you ask me, is Joe Biden the type of guy that would take a $5 million bribe? My answer is, based on my experience, no. But we have a situation here where in June of 2020, I believe it was, the FBI recorded information about a confidential informant that was on the payroll, suggesting there was an interaction between Hunter Biden and Vice President Biden during his vice presidency with officials in Ukraine, maybe Burisma officials, that they're tapes. And I can't walk down the hall without somebody asking me. I don't know. Here's what I do know. The Steele dossier was told to us to be true, and it was a lie. Hunter Biden laptop, we were told, was a fake. It seems to be accurate. I don't know what to tell you, but I do know this. We have an obligation to answer these questions. This is not a Fox News story. This comes from the FBI itself. Now, whether or not this is gossip and hearsay and a bunch of junk like the Steele dossier was, I don't know. I don't know who the source was. I don't know what they heard. I don't know what the people are claiming to have. But I do know this. It's not a laughing matter on our side. The trust of the intelligence community and the investigative agencies in this country regarding political matters is almost zero on our side. So here's what I would hope we could do. I'll turn it over to Senator Grassley in a second. Let's find out what the hell happened. Mr. Raskin, Congressman Raskin, suggests that the Attorney General Barr closed this out. That's not true. That's just not true. He's selling things that are not true. This was apparently handed over to Mr. Brady, U.S. Attorney, who was supposed to look at it and see whether or not it was disinformation by Russia, and apparently concluded it was not. Then it was given to Mr. Weiss, the U.S. Attorney, looking at all this stuff. And I guess here's what I'm saying. If it was dismissed as not being credible, I think the public needs to know what led to that. If it's part of an ongoing investigation, we need to back off because we can't interfere in an investigation. But if there's no there in the view of the intelligence community, the FBI, I want to know how they concluded that. What did they do? And if it is being looked at seriously, then we'll let the system work. So there'll be a letter coming, I think, from most everybody on our side. The answer given to Senator Cruz yesterday will not stand. It will not stand. Senator Grassley.
Could I have just 90 seconds as co-chair with Senator Wyden of the Whistleblower Caucus to think in terms of a lot of people maybe putting their jobs in jeopardy by being whistleblowers on this issue, and I'd like to take 90 seconds to back that up. And it, of course, involves the 1023, and since I've given floor speeches or two on this subject, I won't have to go into detail on that, but we do have a document that the FBI refused to even acknowledge existed until I told Director Wray that I had reviewed about a month ago an unredacted version of this document. The document, obviously, as you know, discusses Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. It references recordings in both. The references millions of dollars to them from foreign nationals. And ask yourself this question if you want to be intellectually honest. The FBI refused the uncorroborated Steele dossier as a basis of investigating Trump and get FISA during the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. What, if anything, has the Justice Department and the FBI done to investigate this 1023 and the people connected with it. The Justice Department, the FBI must show their work. They no longer deserve the benefit of the doubt. Getting a full and complete 1023 is critical for the American people to know and understand the true nature of the document and to hold the Justice Department, the FBI, accountable. So I want everyone to know that I'm going to send a letter, separate from the one that my colleague Graham talked about, send a letter to the Justice Department, the FBI, that demands that they protect these brave and heroic whistleblowers who have come forward to me. I encourage all members, Republican and Democrat, to join in that effort. Protecting whistleblowers is a bipartisan issue.
Senator Grassley, you have been consistent as long as I've known you on that issue, and I respect you very much for it. But I do want to say a word about this so-called FD 1023 form, which I'd never heard of until this controversy came before us. These are forms used by FBI special agents to record raw, unverified reporting from confidential human sources. The form only documents information received and not yet verified. It does not establish the veracity or credibility of the information or reflect the conclusions of the FBI after an investigation. Not only is the information in this type of form unverified, in this instance, this particular confidential human source did not provide firsthand information either. The source was relaying secondhand information the source had heard from a Burisma executive. Based solely on this form, which the FBI has produced for the House Oversight Committee, House Republicans have continued their long-running efforts to raise questions about President Biden based on his son's business dealings, claiming that Hunter Biden's prior business dealings involved the Ukraine have influenced Joe Biden either as vice president or president. There is no evidence whatsoever that either of these claims are true. However, as President Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr made clear, in addition to the FBI, U.S. Attorney Scott Brady and his office vetted his information and then briefed other relevant U.S. attorneys' offices with open investigations. So here's a suggestion. Why don't we take someone who was a U.S. attorney chosen by the Trump administration and give that U.S. attorney the authority to look into this? Not a Biden appointee, but a Trump appointee. Turns out that's exactly what we've done. To the extent any information included in FD 1023 can be verified, Trump appointed U.S. Attorney David Weiss, who has been investigating Hunter Biden's finances since 2019, and was briefed by U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, has the information, and it informs his investigations. The Biden administration has taken a hands-off approach to the work of this U.S. attorney and said he is open to do whatever he believes proper and necessary in this investigation. Questions can be raised about this form. I think we have to understand the origin of the allegations that have been made, how they've gone through at least review by the Barr, Bill Barr, the Attorney General under President Trump, as well as this U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, who I don't know personally. But the fact of the matter is, if there's anything to this, we have a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who for 4 years has been investigating this, and there have been no efforts by the Biden administration to hold him back from his investigation. I think that is the appropriate way to approach this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one, if we've learned anything from the Steele dossier, we should be skeptical of what people say. And we should look at it and not run to the court and tell people it's true when any effort to look at it, you'd find it was false. The problem you have on our side is that there were every indication that it was a bunch of BS, and every time somebody raised that possibility, they went back to court. So none of us believe, quite frankly, that false information or shady information can't be used against our people, because it was. Now, I'm glad to hear your concerns about this source. I don't know either. Listen, I have no idea who the Burisma executive is, where they should be believed at all, or their tapes. If there are tapes, well, then that would go contrary to what President Biden said he did or didn't do as vice president. All I'm asking is, it went to Mr. Brady. We don't know what happened to it. If it's being investigated by Mr. Weiss, that'd be it for me. I'll back off and let him do his job. But here's the central question. If it's not being investigated by Mr. Weiss, it was determined to be a bunch of crap, I want to know who made that decision and what they did. And that's not unreasonable. And Attorney General Barr has told the public this thing was not closed out as claimed by Democratic members of the House. So it's not that complicated. Simple question. What happened to the allegation? If it's part of an ongoing investigation, I'll back off. If it's been disposed of as not being accurate, I want to know how and why, and we can all make our decisions whether or not that was fair. That's not an unfair thing to ask, and I'm hoping together we can get those questions answered.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Grassley.
I can't take very long on this because of the fact that we need to know a couple things. I can't make any judgments about what any hunter has done. My oversight is of the FBI. I think what we need to know is what did the FBI do to follow up on this information that's in 1023. And then in regard to U.S. Attorney Weiss, we don't, do we know if his job follows up on bribery, or is it just this tax stuff that we've been reading about? If it doesn't include bribery, then he can't do anything about investigating it.
Senator, what I have been told is this is an FBI form which was then shared with the Attorney General to the point where he reported that in addition to U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, they've vetted and briefed other relevant U.S. Attorney offices with open investigations about the same forum. That does not seem like concealment. This all occurred during the Trump administration. And now we have David Weiss, who has the authority to investigate Hunter Biden's finances without restriction, as I understand it. No one's holding him back from any investigation. So, from my point of view, I think the Biden family and the vice president or president have shown good faith in this effort by empowering David Weiss to continue this investigation.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, it's a simple question. If it was found not to be believable or accurate, I want to know who made that decision and how they came to that conclusion. That's all I'm asking. If it was sent over to Mr. Weiss as part of a broader investigation and he's looking at this, I'll back off and let him do his job. It's not that complicated. Nobody over here believes in the system much anymore, and let's find out what happened to the allegation. Again, Senator Grassley and his team found this. And you're right, it happened in June of 2020 when the Trump administration, they were involved. So I understand your point. It's not a bad point. I mean, the Attorney General Barr apparently knew about this, sent it to Mr. Brady, and Mr. Brady was supposed to dispose of it one way or the other. Did he say, after looking at it, I found it to be not credible? Or did he send it to Mr. Wise to look at further? I think all of us just want to know what happened. And if it's a part of an ongoing investigation, back off.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.
I know Senator Graham didn't mean this, but I believe in the system. But the American people right now are skeptical about the system. And I happen to believe that the FBI is the premier law enforcement agency in all of human history. And most of the people there just get up every day and do their job in a bipartisan manner, a nonpartisan manner. But what Senator Graham and Senator Grassley are asking in light of history, in light of the context, is not unreasonable. There's no question that for at least a period of time, there were people in charge of the FBI who acted on their political beliefs. And I'm not talking about former Director Hoover. I'm talking about Mr. Wray's predecessor. The director of the FBI at that time decided that he was going to investigate not one, but both presidential candidates. With respect to one, he decided to proceed, with respect to one of those candidates, he decided to proceed on the basis of information that we now know was manufactured by that candidate's opponent, which we call opposition research. In terms of the second presidential candidate, Secretary Clinton, she was investigated. A reasonable person can debate whether or not she should have been, but the FBI director at that time called not one, but two press conferences to talk about the investigation. And after he concluded it, he then opened it back up. And then he called a second press conference. It might have cost Secretary Clinton the election. Now, the American people have seen all this. And in many cases in government and democracy, it's not the substance, it's the perception. And I don't know in this instance, now that the question has been raised, why FBI Director Wray and our Attorney General can't answer Senator Graham's and Senator Grassley's question and put this to rest.
Senator, I'm just thinking about the timeline. This form, FD 1023, one specific one we're talking about here, came up during the Trump administration. The FBI received this information during the Trump administration. And for whatever it was worth, it was communicated to President Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, as well as the FBI. They were in on the conversation as well. Think about the timeline of when it occurred. What was happening in America during that timeline? We were just about to vote on the re-election of President Trump and whether the American people would have him for another term. And now his Attorney General has this information, which some have alleged shows a $5 million bribe to the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Attorney General Barr has this information before the election, and we didn't hear about it. What does that tell you? Was it a cover-up by Barr? For what purpose? This has now become a sinister conspiracy, but I think the timeline argues that it isn't, that there was disclosure and obviously lack of credibility in this FD 1023. Meanwhile, David Weiss is still hot on the case years ago in Delaware as the U.S. Attorney of Hunter Biden. He supposedly, from what I'm told here, was given the same information. Nothing happened. Maybe that means it's not credible. Maybe that means that these reasonable Republican leaders under President Trump decided it was not credible to pursue it. But now it's back again, coincidentally with a week when the former president's appearing before a judge in Florida. It just happens to surface again. I think I'd like to have the question answered that Senator Graham asked, but I think the circumstances suggest that if there was a smoking gun here, some members of the Trump administration would have brought it forward long before now.
Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of wisdom in your words. But once again, you have to consider this in context. You correctly described a 1023. When Senator Grassley first raised this issue, after the whistleblower came to him. The FBI wouldn't even acknowledge there was a 1023. Then the story changed. There was a 1023, but you can't see it.
Yeah.
Then the story changed. Okay, you can see the 1023, but we're going to heavily redact it. I suppose they didn't know Senator Grassley had seen the original document, but he knew what they redacted, which were the allegations about the tapes. Consider the context. I'm not going to go back through what I just said, but the American people are looking at all of this, and they just want an answer. I agree with you. We don't need a conspiracy. Let's end the conspiracy. But for the life of me, I can't understand why our Attorney General and our FBI Director can't come in front of the Judiciary Committee, in front of God and country, and answer Chuck and Lindsey's question. And if they say, we're investigating this, then we back off. If they say there was nothing to it, perhaps we should ask, okay, can you explain why? What's unreasonable about that, given our history over the past 5 years?
Senator, if I might say.
Sure.
This may be a headline on the Daily Conehead, but I have good
Sorry,
news.
I didn't hear you.
This may be a headline for the Daily Conehead.
Yeah, you like that, Daily Conehead?
I like that very much. This year, as in every year that I've chaired the committee, we will have an oversight hearing in the fall with the FBI. And we will have an oversight hearing with the appropriate agencies that we're responsible to oversee. So you said bring the FBI in, we're going to.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it's not quite that simple. We have a former president being tried in Florida. We all can have our views about whether or not that's correct or not, but it is going forward. How did this happen? Some whistleblower told Senator Grassley about this document to the point that they felt compelled to tell him the system is not up and up here. Now, Mr. Alton, who is in charge of investigating the Hunter Biden crowd, was also part of the Steele dossier team. So, yes, it did happen when Attorney General Barr was in office. That is a very good point. Attorney General Barr says he gave it to Brady and it was not deemed to be inaccurate. He didn't close the file. People in the House are saying he did. All I want to know is, what did Mr. Brady do with it? Did he make a decision it was not credible? And we don't even need to do this in public. I just like to hear privately, the committee as a whole, how this was disposed of, so I can go back to South Carolina and tell people with some degree of confidence this matter was looked at, disposed of in a way that made sense to me. And if I can't answer that question, none of us over here can answer that question. We need to be able to answer that question. And quite frankly, if you accuse me of making phone calls to some company, gas company in Ukraine, and I didn't do it, I'd want to tell you I didn't do it, not laugh about it. So I don't know if there are any tapes or not. It could be all made up. It could be. I'm the first to say that. But we're going to find out why they think it was all made up.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lee, I've been advised by the staff we've lost our quorum at this point, and I would give Senator Graham the last word, and I think I have to stand adjourned at this point. No, I don't think we can go any further with it.
Well, we will be back.
So will I. Meeting stands adjourned.